The Valori Dominion had been conquering worlds for longer than humans had been walking upright. They had taken 37 species under their control across 6 different regions of the galaxy. Their empire stretched across stars that humans had not even named yet. And in all that time, they had never failed. Not once. Their secret was simple. They never attacked without knowing they would win. Before any invasion, they studied. They measured. They calculated. They learned everything about their target, and only when the numbers promised victory did they move forward. Ambassador Tevel had spent 2 Earth years observing humanity from a hidden station near the planet called Neptune. He had watched their broadcasts. He had studied their history. He had analyzed their biology down to the smallest detail. Now he stood before the War Council of the Valori Dominion, ready to deliver his report. The council chamber was vast and cold. Crystalline walls reflected the pale blue light that the Valori preferred. 12 high commanders sat in a curved row, their 4 eyes fixed on Tevel as he activated the display screen. An image of a human appeared, rotating slowly. "This is the dominant species of the 3rd planet," Tevel began. "They call themselves humans." The commanders studied the figure with mild interest. It looked soft, fragile, nothing like the armored bodies of the Valori. "Their physical specifications are remarkably poor," Tevel continued. He highlighted different parts of the human body as he spoke. "Their bones are made of calcium and break under moderate pressure. A fall from a short height can kill them. Their skin is thin and tears easily. They bleed when cut, and if they lose too much blood, they die." One of the commanders made a sound of amusement. "They require water constantly. Without it, they die within 3 days. They must sleep for approximately 1/3 of each day, or their minds begin to fail. They cannot survive in cold environments or hot ones without artificial protection. They breathe a specific mixture of gases and will suffocate in minutes without it." High Commander Oles leaned forward in his seat. He was the oldest and most experienced of the council. His exoskeleton was scarred from 100 battles. "And their weapons?" "Primitive," Tevel answered. "They use chemical explosions to propel small pieces of metal. Effective against each other, but their weapons cannot pierce our armor. They have basic nuclear capability, but it is crude and limited to their home system. They have no faster-than-light travel of their own. They depend entirely on the gate network, which we control," Oles said. "Exactly. If we disable the gates, they cannot call for help. They cannot flee. They are trapped." The display changed to show a map of human space. It was small, just a handful of colonies beyond their home world. The largest was a planet they called New Incheon, named after a city on Earth. 300,000 humans lived there. "I recommend we begin with this colony," Tevel said. "It is isolated. It has minimal military presence. Taking it will demonstrate our power and convince the humans to surrender without further conflict." "You believe they will surrender?" another commander asked. "They are logical enough to recognize when they are defeated. Their history shows many examples of this. When faced with overwhelming force, they negotiate. They submit. They survive." Tevel paused. "They are survivors above all else. They will not throw away their lives in a hopeless fight." The council discussed the matter for less than an hour. The decision was unanimous. The invasion would begin in 30 cycles. Far across the galaxy, on the colony of New Incheon, life continued as normal. The planet was beautiful in its own way, with purple forests and silver oceans. The colonists had built their cities in the valleys between great mountains, protected from the harsh winds that swept across the plains. Dr. Yuna worked in a small laboratory near the capital city. She was 43 years old, with gray appearing in her black hair and lines forming around her eyes. Her hands hurt most mornings, a result of arthritis that had started early. Her right knee ached when it rained, a memory of a hiking accident 10 years ago. By Valori's standards, she was already dying. But Una did not think about dying. She thought about her work. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life. For 15 years, she had been cataloging the strange creatures of New Incheon, trying to understand how life had developed so differently on this world. She was examining a sample of local fungus when her assistant burst through the door. "Doctor, you need to see this." Una followed him to the window. The sky, normally a soft shade of orange during the day, had turned violet. And in that violet sky, shapes were appearing. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Ships. Una had never seen Valori ships before. Nobody on New Incheon had. But she knew immediately what they were. The broadcasts had been warning about the Valori for months. The government had told everyone not to worry. The Valori had no reason to attack humanity. Relations were peaceful. The broadcasts had been wrong. The first explosions came from the orbital defense platforms. Una saw them as brief flashes of light, there and gone in an instant. Then the ships began descending through the atmosphere, leaving trails of fire behind them. The emergency sirens started wailing. A voice came over every speaker in the city, calm but urgent. All citizens were to proceed to the nearest shelter. This was not a drill. Una grabbed her emergency pack, the one she had prepared months ago and hoped never to use. It contained water, food, medicine for her arthritis, and a small data pad holding all of her research. She ran out of the laboratory and joined the flood of people moving through the streets. She saw families holding hands so they would not be separated. She saw elderly people being helped by strangers. She saw children crying and parents trying to stay calm. She saw all the weakness that the Valori had measured, gathered together in one terrified crowd. The shelters were built into the mountains, deep tunnels carved from solid rock. They had been constructed years ago when the colony was first established as protection against natural disasters. Nobody had imagined they would be needed for this. Una reached the shelter entrance as the first Valori ground troops landed in the city. She looked back and saw them, tall figures in gleaming armor, moving with perfect coordination. They did not run. They did not hurry. They advanced with the confidence of a force that knew it could not be stopped. A young man near Una was staring at the invaders, his face pale with fear. "We cannot fight that," he whispered. "Nobody can fight that." Una did not answer. She took his arm and pulled him into the shelter. The heavy doors closed behind them, shutting out the sounds of the invasion. In the darkness of the tunnel, surrounded by frightened strangers, Una thought about what she had seen. The Valori were strong. Their armor was thick. Their weapons were advanced. Their ships controlled the sky. But Una was a scientist. She believed that everything could be understood. Everything had a weakness. She just had to find it. Outside, the Valori continued their advance. They counted each human they captured or killed. They recorded each building they destroyed. They measured everything, just as they always did. And in their reports, they noted that resistance was minimal. The humans were behaving exactly as predicted. Fragile creatures, easily broken. This conquest would be finished in 12 cycles, perhaps fewer. They did not notice the old woman who hid in her restaurant basement instead of evacuating, already making plans. They did not notice the teenage boy who watched their patrols from a broken window, memorizing their routes. They did not notice the scientist in the mountain shelter who was beginning to study them, the same way they had studied humanity. The Valori measured everything they could see. They missed everything they could not. The capital fell in 6 hours. The colonial militia fought bravely, but bravery was not enough against Valori armor and Valori weapons. Commander Tai Wu watched from a rooftop as his soldiers retreated through the burning streets, carrying their wounded and leaving their dead behind. Tai Wu was 61 years old. He had retired from the Earth Navy 8 years ago, expecting to spend his remaining days fishing in new ancient silver oceans. He had bad knees, a weak heart, and hands that trembled when he was tired. 3 weeks ago, the colonial government had asked him to return to service. There was nobody else with his experience. Now he stood on a rooftop, watching everything he was supposed to protect burn. "Commander, we need to move," said Lieutenant Jiwan. She was 24 years old, thin and tall, with short hair and serious eyes. 3 weeks ago, she had been a school teacher. She had taught mathematics to children in the Western District. When the call for volunteers came, she had signed up immediately. Her students were dead now. The Western District had been one of the first areas hit. Tai Wu nodded slowly. "Order all units to fall back to the mountain passes. We cannot hold the city." "Sir, if we abandon the city, we lose buildings," Tai Wu interrupted. "Buildings can be rebuilt. People cannot." He turned to face her. "Get everyone out. Soldiers, civilians, everyone. We retreat, we regroup, we survive. Understood?" Jiwan saluted and ran to deliver the orders. Tai Wu took one last look at the burning city before climbing down from the roof. His knees screamed with pain at every step. He ignored them. The retreat was chaos. Thousands of people moved through the mountain passes, a river of humanity flowing away from destruction. Soldiers tried to maintain order, but there were too many people and too few soldiers. Families became separated. Children cried for parents they could not find. The old and the sick struggled to keep up. Mira walked among them, trying to help where she could. She was 35 years old, with calloused hands and tired eyes. She had worked in logistics for the colony's supply department, organizing shipments and managing warehouses. It was boring work, but she had been good at it. Her husband had worked in the same department. He had been at the main warehouse when the Valori bombed it. There had been no warning. One moment the warehouse existed, and the next it was a crater. Myra had not cried yet. There was no time for crying. People needed food, water, medicine. They needed someone to organize the chaos, to make sure resources went where they were needed. Myra could do that. So she did. She found Tai Wu at a checkpoint near the mountain shelter entrance. He was arguing with a young officer about something. "Commander," she said, approaching, "I need to talk to you about supplies." Tai Wu turned to her. His face was gray with exhaustion. "What about them?" "We do not have enough. Not for this many people. The main warehouses are destroyed. What we have will last maybe 10 days if we ration carefully." Tai Wu closed his eyes for a moment. "Then we need to find more. The Valori control the city. They control the farms. They control everything. Then we take it back." Tai Wu opened his eyes. "Not the whole city. Just what we need. Small raids. Quick strikes. Get in, grab supplies, get out." Myra thought about this. It was dangerous. It was probably stupid. But it was also the only option. "I can organize that," she said. "I know where everything is stored. I know the routes. But I will need people who can fight. Lieutenant G1 will assign soldiers to you." Tai Wu put a hand on her shoulder. "What is your name?" "Myra. Myra, I am sorry about your husband." Mira felt something twist in her chest. She pushed it down. "Thank you, Commander. I will get started." She walked away before the tears could come. In the mountain shelter, Dr. Yuna had set up a small workspace in a storage room. She had her datapad, a few scientific instruments she had grabbed during the evacuation, and a growing collection of notes. She was studying the Valori. Every time someone came to the shelter with a story about the invaders, Yuna listened. She asked questions. What did they look like up close? How did they move? Did they seem bothered by the cold? The heat? Loud noises? Most people thought she was strange. Some thought she was crazy. But a few understood what she was doing. "You are looking for a weakness," said an old woman who had appeared in the doorway. She was small and wrinkled, with white hair pulled back in a neat bun. Her name was Sujin, and she was 78 years old. Yuna looked up from her notes. "Yes, good." Sujin walked into the room and sat down on a crate. "I have been doing the same thing. You are a scientist?" Sujin laughed. It was a warm sound despite everything. "No, I owned a restaurant in the city. But I have been watching people for 78 years. You learn things. What have you learned about the Valori?" Sujin leaned forward. "They are organized. Very organized. Everything they do follows a pattern. Their patrols go the same routes at the same times. Their vehicles follow the same paths. They do not adapt. They follow their plans." Yuna wrote this down. "That is useful. Also, they are afraid of us." Yuna looked up sharply. "Afraid? They have conquered the entire colony." "Yes, but they keep their distance from us. They do not come close unless they have to. They watch us like we are dangerous animals." Sujin smiled. "They know we are weak, but they are still afraid. Why is that?" Yuna thought about this for a long time after Sujin left. The Valori had studied humanity. They knew how fragile human bodies were. They knew human weapons could not hurt them. They had no logical reason to fear humanity. And yet, they did. The first supply raid happened 3 days later. Mira led a team of 12 people through the sewer tunnels that ran beneath the city. The tunnels were dark, cold, and full of terrible smells. Several team members wanted to turn back. "Keep moving," Myra said. Her voice was calm but firm. "We are almost there." They reached a warehouse that the Valori had not yet secured. Mira had worked in this building for years. She knew every door, every hallway, every hiding spot. She led her team through the shadows, filling their bags with food, medicine, and water purification tablets. They were loading the last bags when a Valori patrol appeared at the main entrance. Everyone froze. The Valori were huge, nearly 8 feet tall, covered in dark armor that looked like polished stone. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. One shot from those weapons could turn a human to ash. Myra did not run. She did not scream. She simply pointed to the back exit and whispered, "Go, slowly. Do not make noise." The team moved. One by one, they slipped out of the warehouse while the Valori searched the front. Mira was the last to leave. She waited until everyone was safe before following. They made it back to the mountain shelter with enough supplies to last another week. When they arrived, exhausted and shaking, they found people waiting for them. Not just the people they had left behind, but new faces. People who had hidden in the city, waiting for rescue that never came. People who had decided to fight. "How did you get here?" Mira asked a young boy who could not have been older than 16. "I walked," the boy said. His name was Hajun. "I watched the patrols and found the gaps. It was not hard." Myra looked at him. This child had crossed an occupied city alone, dodging alien soldiers, with nothing but his eyes and his mind to guide him. "Can you do it again?" she asked. Hajun nodded. That night, in the depths of the mountain, Commander Taiwu gathered his remaining officers. There were only 8 of them left. 8 officers, 300 soldiers, and 10,000 civilians. "We cannot win this fight," he said. "The Valori are stronger, faster, and better equipped. They have ships, armor, and weapons we cannot match. By every measurement, we are defeated." Nobody spoke. They all knew he was right. But we are not going to surrender, Taiwu continued. We are going to fight in ways they cannot measure. We are going to be everywhere and nowhere. We are going to make them bleed for every street, every building, every inch of this planet. We are going to show them that measuring our weakness was not enough. He looked around the room at his tired, broken, terrified officers. They missed something, he said, and we are going to teach them what it was. 6 cycles had passed since the invasion began. By Valori calculations, the conquest should have been complete. The humans should have surrendered. Their leadership should have negotiated terms. The colony should have been peaceful and productive, ready to serve the Dominion. None of this had happened. High Commander Oles stood in the command center of the occupation force, staring at reports that made no sense. Ambassador Tevel stood beside him, struggling to explain. There have been incidents, Tevel said carefully. Unexpected resistance activities. Incidents. Ole's voice was flat. Explain these incidents. Tevel activated the display. A map of the colony appeared, covered in red markers. Each marker represented an attack on Valori forces. Supply convoys have been ambushed 37 times. We have lost significant quantities of equipment and provisions. Patrol units have been attacked at night. Individual soldiers have disappeared. Our communication lines have been disrupted repeatedly. Ole studied the map. The attacks were scattered across the entire colony. There was no pattern. No central point. No obvious leadership. How many humans are doing this? We do not know, Tevel admitted. We have captured some, but they do not give information. They die first. Ole's turned to face him. They die? They choose death over speaking? Yes, this was not in the calculations. Humans valued survival. Their history showed this again and again. They negotiated. They compromised. They surrendered when the situation was hopeless. They did not choose death. Perhaps they believe rescue is coming, Ole suggested. The gates are disabled. No rescue can come. They know this. Then why do they fight? Tevel had no answer. In the mountains, the resistance grew stronger every day. Mira had organized a supply network that stretched through the sewers, caves, and abandoned tunnels beneath the colony. Grandmother Sujin coordinated everything from her basement command post, using runners to carry messages when electronic communication was too dangerous. Hajun had become their best scout. The teenage boy moved through the occupied city like a ghost, watching, learning, reporting. He had memorized every patrol route, every guard position, every weakness in the Valori perimeter. They change guards at the same time every day, Hajun told Commander Taiwu during a briefing. They eat at the same time. They sleep at the same time. They do not understand randomness. What do you mean? Taiwu asked. They expect everything to follow rules. When something unexpected happens, they do not know what to do. I have seen it. If a patrol meets something not in their orders, they stop. They wait. They call for instructions. Taiwu smiled for the first time in weeks. They are predictable. Yes, and we are not. Lieutenant Jiwan had been training civilians to fight. Not open combat. They could not win that way, but sabotage. How to disable vehicles. How to create distractions. How to set traps and disappear before the enemy could respond. She had 40 students now. Farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, teenagers. People who had never held a weapon in their lives. People who had lost everything and wanted to do something about it. You will probably die, she told them honestly. The Valori are stronger than us, faster, better armed. If they catch you, they will kill you. Nobody left. Good, Jiwan said. Now let me teach you how to make them regret coming here. Dr. Yuna worked day and night in her small laboratory. She had been studying the Valori specimens they had recovered, pieces of armor, drops of biological fluid, fragments of equipment. She was looking for anything that could give humanity an advantage. Her arthritis had gotten worse without proper medication. Some mornings, she could barely hold her instruments. She worked anyway. Sleep was something that happened between experiments, a few hours here and there, never enough. "You need to rest," Myra told her one evening, bringing food that Yuna had forgotten to eat. "I need to find something," Yuna replied without looking up. "They have a weakness. Everything has a weakness. I just need to find it. And if you die of exhaustion before you find it?" Yuna finally looked up. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but they were sharp. "Focused. Then someone else will continue my work. I am documenting everything. But I am close, Myra. I can feel it." She was studying the Valori exoskeleton, the natural armor that covered their bodies. It was incredibly strong, resistant to bullets and blades and almost everything humans could throw at it. But it was not invincible. It could not be. The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning, when Yuna was so tired she could barely see straight. She had been playing audio recordings near a sample of Valori armor, testing different frequencies almost at random. Most had no effect. The armor sat there, cold and dead and impossible. Then she played a frequency of 17.3 kilohertz. The armor cracked. Yuna stared at it for a long moment, sure she was dreaming. She played the frequency again. Another crack appeared. The armor was vibrating, resonating with the sound in a way that tore it apart from within. She ran to find Commander Taiwu. "Are you certain?" he asked, still half asleep. "I have tested it multiple times. The Valori exoskeleton is vulnerable to specific sound frequencies. Their own biology works against them. If we can generate this frequency loudly enough, across a wide area, we can disable their armor. Maybe disable them entirely." Taiwu was fully awake now. "Can we build something to generate this frequency?" "I think so. Yes, but it will take time. And we will need parts. Make a list. Mira will find what you need." Taiwu put his hands on Yuna's shoulders. "You may have just saved us all." In the Valori Command Center, the situation grew more confusing by the day. High Commander Oles had requested reinforcements, something that had never happened in the history of the Dominion. The humans were not winning, but they were not losing either. They were simply refusing to stop. "I do not understand," Tevel said during their daily briefing. "We have destroyed their military. We control their food supply. We have cut their communications. They should have no hope." "Perhaps they do not need hope," Oles replied. "What do you mean?" Oles was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We calculated their capacity for resistance based on logical factors. Resources, weapons, soldiers, probability of success. But these humans do not seem to use logic. They must use some form of logic. They are intelligent creatures. Yes, but their logic is different from ours." Oles turned to the window, looking out at the occupied city. Even now, at night, he could see fires burning where resistance fighters had struck. "We asked ourselves what they could do. We should have asked what they were willing to do. Is there a difference? It appears so. In the mountains, the resistance prepared for something bigger. Grandmother Sujin had coordinated with cells across the colony. Hajun had identified the weak points in the Valori defenses. Mira had gathered the materials Dr. Yuna needed. Jiwan had trained her fighters. Taiwu had created the plan. They were not ready. They did not have enough weapons, enough soldiers, enough supplies. By any reasonable measurement, their plan should fail. But Taiwu remembered something his grandfather had told him many years ago during a different war on a different world. The enemy counts your weapons and your soldiers. They measure your strength and calculate their odds. But they cannot count your heart. They cannot measure your will. And sometimes, that is all you need. He gathered his officers for a final briefing. In 2 days we attack, he said. Not to win. Not to defeat them completely. But to show them something their calculations missed. To show them that weak does not mean broken. That fragile does not mean defeated. That human beings do not stop fighting just because someone tells them they should. He looked around the room at faces that had become familiar over weeks of hardship. The old, the young, the sick, the scared. The stubborn, impossible, unbreakable humans who refused to surrender. They measured our weakness, Taiwu said. It is time to show them our will. The Valori called it the Night of Sirens. Humans would remember it as the night everything changed. It began at exactly midnight, when the twin moons of New Incheon hung directly overhead. Across the entire occupied territory, in cities and towns and outposts, speakers that the resistance had spent weeks hiding came alive at the same moment. The sound they produced was not loud at first. It was a low hum, barely noticeable, more felt than heard. But as the seconds passed, the hum grew stronger. It climbed in pitch and intensity until it became a wailing cry that filled the night air. The Valori soldiers heard it and felt nothing unusual. It was just noise, strange noise from a strange planet. Some of them looked around in confusion. Others continued their patrols, ignoring the sound completely. Then the screaming started. It began with the soldiers closest to the speakers. Their exoskeletons began to vibrate, a subtle trembling at first, then growing stronger. The natural armor that protected them, that made them invincible against human weapons, began to crack. Pieces fell away like shattered glass. The soft bodies beneath, bodies that had never known vulnerability, were suddenly exposed. The pain was beyond anything the Valori had evolved to handle. Their species had developed armor millions of years ago precisely so they would never experience this kind of agony. Now, for the first time in their evolutionary history, they learned what it meant to be unprotected. Many of them collapsed. Some died from the shock alone. And in that moment of chaos, the humans attacked. Commander Taiwu led the assault on the main command center. He had 40 soldiers with him, all volunteers, all knowing they would probably not survive. His bad heart pounded in his chest. His weak knees screamed with every step. He ran anyway. The Valori guards at the entrance were on the ground, their armor crumbling around them. Taiwu almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Then he remembered the burning city, the dead children, the families torn apart, and his pity died. "Move!" he shouted. We did not have much time. The sound would not last forever. They had limited power, limited equipment, limited everything. The window of opportunity would close quickly. They had to make it count. On the other side of the city, Lieutenant Ji-won led her trained civilians against the shield generator. This was the device that protected the Valori ships in orbit, the reason human forces from Earth could not reach them. Without it, reinforcements might have a chance. "Remember what I taught you," she said to her fighters. "Quick strikes. Do not stand and fight. Hit them and move." A young woman named Yoonji, who had been a baker before the invasion, nodded grimly. She was carrying explosives that Myra's supply teams had assembled from stolen materials. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were steady. "I remember," she said. "Make them regret coming here." They moved through the streets like shadows. The Valori defenders were disorganized, many of them wounded by the sound weapon. Ji-won's team slipped past them, heading for the generator complex. Hajun was already there. The teenage boy had snuck into the complex hours earlier, hiding in a ventilation shaft and waiting. When the sirens started, he began moving, disabling security systems and opening doors for the assault team. "This way," he whispered when Ji-won arrived. The main power core is below. But there are guards. How many? 6, but they are hurt. The sound got them too. Jiwan made a decision. Eunji, give me the explosives. I will handle the guards. You get the rest of the team to safety. Lieutenant, that is an order. Jiwan took the explosives and descended alone into the generator chamber. The 6 Valori guards were there, but they were barely standing. Their armor was cracked and broken. They looked at her with eyes that showed something she had never seen in them before. Fear. I am sorry, she said, and she meant it. Then she shot them with a captured Valori weapon and planted the explosives. The shield generator exploded 5 minutes later. In orbit, Valori ships suddenly found themselves vulnerable. Human forces from Earth, waiting at the edge of the system for weeks, finally had their opening. Grandmother Sujin coordinated everything from her basement. She was 78 years old, with a heart condition that should have hospitalized her. She had not slept in 3 days. Her hand shook as she moved pieces on her makeshift strategy map, directing teams through the chaos. Team 7, move to Sector 4. Team 12, hold your position. Team 3, I need you at the medical center. We have wounded. A young runner appeared at her door, out of breath. Ma'am, the communications tower is secure. We have contact with Earth. Sujin closed her eyes and allowed herself one moment of relief. Just one moment. Then she opened them again and returned to work. Across the colony, the story was the same. Small teams of humans attacking with speed and precision, striking the Valori while they were vulnerable. It was not a clean victory. Many humans died that night, but many more Valori died with them. Mira found herself in the medical center, helping the wounded. Not just human wounded. Valori wounded too. A captured Valori soldier lay on a table, his armor completely gone, his strange gray body exposed and bleeding. He looked at Mira with eyes that were surprisingly expressive for an alien, filled with confusion and pain. Why? He asked in broken human speech. The Valori had learned human languages during their observation period. Why you help me? Mira wrapped a bandage around his wounded limb. Because you are hurt. I am enemy. You are defeated, she said simply. That makes you someone who needs help. The Valori stared at her. His species had no framework for this. They conquered or were conquered. They killed or were killed. The idea of mercy for an enemy was not just strange to them. It was impossible. It made no sense. I do not understand humans, he said finally. Mira smiled tiredly. That is okay. Sometimes we do not understand ourselves. Commander Taiwu found High Commander Olis in the command center, surrounded by the bodies of his guards. The Valori leader was wounded, his armor cracked, but he was still standing. Still proud. You have won this battle, Oli said. But the Dominion has many more ships. Many more soldiers. You cannot win the war. Maybe not, Taiwu admitted. His heart was pounding dangerously fast. His vision was blurring at the edges. He was pushing his whole body far past its limits. But we do not need to win the war. We just need to show you that winning is not worth the cost. Cost is calculated, measured. We have the resources to absorb any cost. Can you? Taiwu stepped closer, looking the alien commander in the eyes. Can you afford to fight a species that will never stop? That will turn every victory into a loss? That will make you bleed for every inch of every planet you try to take. Olis was silent. You measured our weakness, Taiwu continued. Our fragile bodies. Our short lives. Our primitive weapons. And you were right. We are weak. But you missed something important. What did we miss? The will to keep fighting when there is no hope. The strength to stand up after we fall. The stubborn, stupid, beautiful refusal to surrender just because someone tells us we should. Taiwu smiled, despite everything. You missed our humanity. The battle ended near dawn. The Valori occupation force was broken. Their ships in orbit were retreating, pursued by human vessels from Earth. The colony of New Incheon was free. But freedom came at a cost. Commander Taiwu collapsed shortly after the battle ended. His heart, pushed beyond its limits, finally gave out. He died surrounded by the soldiers he had led, the people he had saved. Lieutenant Jiwon survived the generator assault, but just barely. She would carry scars for the rest of her life. And Dr. Yuna, the scientist who had discovered the weapon that made victory possible, died 3 days later. Her body, already weakened by illness and exhaustion, could not recover from the strain she had put it through. She died in her laboratory, surrounded by her notes, knowing that her work had saved thousands of lives. Mira was with her at the end. Did we win? Yuna asked, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, Myra said, holding her hand. We won! Yuna smiled. Good, that is good. She closed her eyes and did not open them again. The humans of New Incheon buried their dead with honor. There were too many graves to count, too many names to remember. But they remembered anyway, because that was what humans did. They remembered, and they rebuilt, and they refused to forget. One cycle after the Battle of New Incheon, Ambassador Tevel stood before the War Council of the Valori Dominion for the final time. The great crystalline chamber was silent. The 12 high commanders sat in their curved row, but their posture was different now. Less confident, less certain. High Commander Oles was absent, killed during the human counterattack. Tevel had prepared his report carefully. It was the most important document of his career. Perhaps the most important document in Dominion history. And it began with an admission of failure. The invasion of the human colony New Incheon has been terminated, he said. Our forces have withdrawn. Our losses were significant. The operation was a failure. None of the commanders spoke. They had already seen the casualty reports. They knew the numbers. I have been asked to explain how this happened, Tevel continued. How a species we identified as weak, primitive, and easily conquered managed to defeat an occupying force of the Valori Dominion. How our calculations could have been so wrong. He activated the display, showing the original data on humanity. The fragile bones, the thin skin, the constant need for water and sleep, the short lifespans. All the measurements that had promised an easy victory. Our data was accurate, Tevel said. Everything we measured about human biology was correct. They are physically weak. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. By every objective measurement, they should have been conquered easily. He paused, letting the silence stretch. But our data was incomplete. The display changed, showing images from the occupation. Humans fighting in the streets. Humans dragging wounded friends to safety. Humans building weapons from scrap metal and hope. An old woman coordinating resistance from a basement. A teenager mapping enemy patrols. A scientist working through the night despite illness and pain. We measured their bodies, Tevel said. We measured their weapons. We measured their resources and their population and their industrial capacity. We measured everything we could see and touch and count. But we missed the thing that mattered most. What did we miss? One of the commanders asked, though he already suspected the answer. Their will. Tevel brought up a new display, this one showing text, quotes from captured humans, translated into Valori language. A soldier told us that he kept fighting because surrender would have been an insult to those who died. A mother said she fought because her children deserved a future free from fear. An old man said he fought because he was too stubborn to know when to quit. Tevel looked at the council. None of these are logical reasons. None of these make sense by our standards. They are emotional, irrational, stupid perhaps. Then why did they work? Because the humans believed them. Belief, it seems, creates its own kind of strength. A strength we cannot measure. A strength we cannot predict. A strength we cannot defeat because it does not follow rules we understand. The council members shifted in their seats. This was uncomfortable territory. The Dominion was built on logic, on calculation, on certainty. The idea that something unmeasurable could defeat them was deeply disturbing. "There is more," Tevel said. "After the battle, I observed something I still cannot explain. Human soldiers providing medical care to wounded Valori, sharing their limited food with captured enemies, treating those who had invaded their world with compassion instead of hatred. Why would they do that?" I asked. They said that cruelty was not strength, that mercy was not weakness, that the worth of a species was measured not by how they treated their friends, but by how they treated their enemies. Tevel shook his head slowly. "These are not the beliefs of a primitive species. These are the beliefs of a species that has thought deeply about what it means to exist, what it means to be alive, what it means to be worthy." He deactivated the display and faced the council directly. "My recommendation is as follows. Do not engage humanity in conflict. Their weakness is measurable. Their strength is not. They are not worth the cost of conquest." One of the commanders leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we fear these creatures?" "I am suggesting we respect them. There is a difference." The council deliberated for 3 days. In the end, they accepted Tevel's recommendation. The invasion of Earth was officially cancelled. Human space was designated a protected zone, to be avoided by all Dominion vessels. Humanity would be left alone. But the story did not end there. News of the Battle of New Incheon spread through the galaxy, not through official channels, but through whispers and rumors and stories passed from ship to ship, world to world. Species that the Valori had conquered heard about the humans who had fought back. Species that had surrendered when the situation seemed hopeless learned about the humans who had refused to give up. And something began to change. On a world called Keth, a species that had been under Valori control for 100 years began organizing resistance. Their leaders spoke of the human example, of the old commander who had led soldiers with a weak heart and bad knees, of the scientist who had worked until her body gave out, of the grandmother who had coordinated a war from a basement. On a moon called Vera, another conquered species began hiding weapons and making plans. They told stories of the human teacher who became a soldier, the teenager who became a spy, the logistics worker who became a resistance leader. On a dozen worlds, 100 worlds, the same pattern repeated. Oppressed species looking at humanity and asking themselves a dangerous question. If the weak and fragile humans could fight back, why could they not do the same? The Valori Dominion, which had seemed invincible for so long, began to shake. On Earth, the survivors of New Incheon were celebrated as heroes. Parades were held. Medals were awarded. Speeches were given about courage and sacrifice and the indomitable human spirit. Mira attended the ceremonies, but she did not feel like a hero. She felt tired. She felt sad. She felt the weight of everyone she had lost, everyone she could not save. Her husband, her friends, the young soldiers who had died following orders she had given. After the parades ended, she returned to New Incheon. The colony was being rebuilt. Crews worked day and night, clearing rubble and constructing new buildings. Life was returning, slowly but steadily. Mira found herself at the memorial that had been built in the center of the capital. It was a simple structure, a wall of white stone covered with names. Thousands of names. All the people who had died during the invasion and the resistance. She found her husband's name near the middle. She touched it gently, feeling the cold stone beneath her fingers. "We won," she said softly. "I wish you could have seen it." Lieutenant Jiwan joined her a moment later. The young officer walked with a limp now, a permanent reminder of the generator assault. She carried flowers, which she placed at the base of the wall. "Are you okay?" Jiwan asked. "No," Myra admitted. "But I will be, eventually." They stood together in silence, two women who had been through something terrible and survived. Two women who had learned what they were capable of when everything was taken from them. "Do you think they will come back?" Jiwan asked. "The Valori? Maybe. Someday. But if they do, we will be ready." "How do you know?" Mira thought about the question. She thought about grandmother Sujin, who had passed away peacefully in her sleep a month after the battle, finally allowing herself to rest. She thought about Hajun, who was now training as a pilot, determined to carry the fight to the stars. She thought about Dr. Yuna, whose notes had been published and shared with every human colony, ensuring that her discovery would never be lost. "Because that is what humans do," she said finally. "We fall down and we get back up. We lose and we try again. We break and we heal. Over and over and over until we win or until we die. And even when we die, we pass on what we learned to the next generation." She turned away from the memorial and looked at the rising city around her. Construction workers shouting to each other. Children playing in the streets. Old people sitting in the sun, telling stories about the war. Life, stubborn and beautiful and impossible, continuing despite everything. "They measured our weakness," Myra said. "They saw our fragile bodies and our short lives and our primitive technology. They saw everything we could not do, everything we could not survive, everything that should have defeated us." She smiled, remembering Tai Wu's words from that night in the mountain shelter. They missed a will. Far away, across the vast darkness of space, other species were learning the same lesson. Species that had forgotten how to hope were remembering. Species that had accepted defeat were beginning to fight. Species that had surrendered were rising again. And in the hearts of all of them burned a simple truth that the Valori had failed to measure, that the will to resist cannot be calculated. That hope is not subject to analysis. That sometimes the smallest, weakest, most fragile thing in the universe is also the most dangerous. Because it simply will not stop. The war was not over. It would never truly be over. There would always be powers that saw weakness and thought it meant surrender. There would always be forces that measured strength in weapons and armor and ships. But there would also always be humans. Stubborn, impossible, unbreakable humans. And wherever humans went, they carried with them a message that echoed across the stars. You can measure our weakness, but you will never measure our will. And that will make all the difference.